Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Daita Sergi, Education Programs Manager with AASHE, and I'll be the moderator today. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. As many of you know, AASHE's mission is to inspire and catalyze higher education to lead the global sustainability transformation. We are an international association with about 1,000 members spread across more than 20 countries, including Australia and Korea. We serve as the professional home for campus sustainability staff, but we offer resources for everyone in higher education. We provide an expansive collection of online resources, networking tools, and educational events such as today's webinar, and an annual conference and expo which will be held in Pittsburgh, October 2 to the 5th. The call for proposals for all oral presentation types is closed, but you can still submit for a poster or networking meeting. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone in the audience is on mute, but please feel free to ask questions or provide comments at any point during the presentation. You can do that by typing your questions or comments in the questions pane on the control panel on your screen. If you have additional questions, please email them to education@aashe.org and we will get back to you. At the end of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback regarding today's presentation. We take your suggestions into account when planning for future webinars, so please do provide this feedback. Please know this webinar is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties or have to leave early, you and others can view the recording later. The recording and presentation materials will all be available in the Campus Sustainability Hub after the live broadcast. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Jeffrey Habron, Weston Drips, and the students of the Sustainability Science Practicum. Jeffrey joined Furman University as Professor of Sustainability Science in the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences in August 2017. Prior to that, he spent 3 years at Warren Wilson College as Director of Electronic Portfolios, Director of First Year Seminar, and faculty member in the Department of Environmental Studies. Weston is the director of the David Schei Center for Sustainability. Before coming to Furman in 2005, he was a researcher at MIT in the Department of Environmental and Civil Engineering. At Furman, West is known as a very engaging teacher, an active researcher, and an environmental activist, and has been very involved with the university's sustainability efforts and sustainability student living communities. In the interest of time, I will not go over their full bios, but you can find more about the presenters on the AASHE website under this webinar listing. So finally, it is my pleasure to welcome all attendees and thank you for joining us today. At this time, I'm going to turn things to Weston to get us started.
All right, Daita. Let's see. Can you see me now in terms of our screen? Let's see.
Not yet.
You see it? All right.
Not yet.
Not yet? Oh, it's asking me. Hold 1 second. Now we should be good.
Yes. Now.
All right. Well, thanks to all those who are joining us today. We're excited to kind of share our story around our Sustainability Science Practicum course. As Daita said, I'm Wes Drips, and Jeff Habron and I have been teaching this class. But let me give you a little bit of backdrop about Furman University for those that don't know us. We're a 4-year private liberal arts institution located in the upstate of South Carolina, just outside Greenville, South Carolina. We have about 2,700 undergrad students. We're predominantly an undergrad teaching institution with about 240 faculty. We are a residential campus, and you'll see how that plays into some of the projects we're going to share today. Pretty much all students live on campus, and we're a pretty sizable campus for a small liberal arts. We have about 750 acres across which the campus is spread. We have a long-standing commitment to sustainability. We've probably a few decades worth of commitment where it's been part of our strategic plan, something we have worked very hard at, that our president, both our facilities folks, Res Life, and faculty have been behind. And as a result of that, we have actually an academic center here on campus, the Schei Center for Sustainability, that I direct that has really helped kind of catalyze a lot of our sustainability efforts. We also, about 8 years ago, added a Bachelor of Science degree program in sustainability science, and the students you're going to hear from today are all part of that program, soon to be graduates. And so that, I think, provides just a little bit of background and context, although the course that we're going to share today, I think, is still applicable to institutions from R1s down to liberal arts as well, and kind of everything in between. We also act as one of AASHE's Centers for Sustainability across the curriculum. So I wanted to just kind of mention that. We run a national workshop every year that we would love to have you come join us if you have not been to campus. We're teaching another one around campuses, living learning labs in June, and I can tell you more about that if those that are interested. Let me turn it over to Jeffrey, who's going to talk a little bit about kind of the basics of the course, and I'll give you an outline, and then we'll turn it over to the students to kind of share what they've learned and their projects.
Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Hebron, and I wanted to give you some educational context for our class and the project. So the Association of American Colleges and Universities have emphasized the importance of having capstone experiences where students generate signature work. That signature work should have some kind of societal meaning in terms of that work and not just be a trivial exercise. And they emphasize that sustainability is a perfect topic for generating this kind of signature work. Signature work is also an opportunity to actualize some of the liberal learning goals and apply them into real world settings. Signature work also is idealized if it has the ability to engage with a diverse community engagement opportunities, especially those trying to seek solutions to wicked or intractable problems. Recognizing the importance of signature work, the studies have shown that perhaps only 1/3 of students nationwide engage into capstone projects, and only 20% of students nationwide do undergraduate research. Signature work has been identified as a high impact practice, especially through the work of George Koo. And it suggests that having signature work through capstones can increase deep and integrative learning and student engagement. In terms of how we actualize that here at Furman, we're following a model developed on applied sustainability learning. This is an approach that looks at a scaffolded approach to learning from year 1 to year 4. This is a way to eventually lead to a capstone signature experience. What it does is there's a couple axes that say over the course of 4 years, it should introduce students and increase their responsibility in terms of engaging with the world from one that's curated purely from an instructor and in a classroom and expanding it out to a more applied setting. It also calls for increasing student self-direction over time. And so you'll see the 4 stages that interact both with student responsibility and interaction with the world. This is how our 4-year pathway looks at Furman. As a sustainability science program, we rely heavily on the work of Kate Raworth and the Sustainability Doughnut that says that in order to achieve sustainability, you need to stay above a minimum social foundation, things such as access to food and water, fostering networks, dealing with social justice, while also not exceeding planetary limits in terms of the ecological ceiling, things like climate change and freshwater withdrawals. We utilize this through 6 required core courses that you'll see here that go from the 100 level to the 400 level, which is students have the option to engage in individual thesis, working with an individual faculty member over the summer, or they can engage with practicum research and projects during the fall, which is what our class represents. So in the context of this scaffolded learning, you'll see that the 100 level class has Bringing the World In, which is mainly small labs and exercises. And then the 200 level classes start to introduce project level work, ultimately leading to our signature capstone work, either in the practicum or the thesis. So this is our outline, again, in terms of the pedagogy and the educational context for our class.
I'll pick up where Jeffrey left off in terms of telling you a little bit more about the practicum course itself. So this is a 4-credit course, so it is credit bearing that is taught during the fall semester. It meets twice a week for 3 hours at a stint, so 6 contact hours over the course of a week. It is intended to be our capstone experience, and as Jeff mentioned, that students have the option of choosing either a thesis or a practicum. One interesting side note, the practicum really came out of a necessity for us to provide a high impact experience to all of our majors, and our major base has grown so quickly that we were having a hard time being able to accommodate 30, 40 students all doing theses. So we initially added the practicum as a way to provide kind of more of a team-based applied research project focused on solutions, and ideally with some kind of partnership at the local level with either a local community partner, which is how the course was taught last year, or this year focused actually on campus sustainability. The topics are wide ranging, and I'll share kind of how we chose those topics, but really the idea was to help prepare students that are coming out of the program with some kind of experience around interdisciplinary team-based research that I think will serve them well as they pursue careers in a variety of different kind of sustainability subdisciplines. It also fulfills a general education requirement. We have a writing research intensive requirement that was recently added that is being taught mostly at the major level, but this fulfills that general education requirement within our degree. We had 16 students actually in the class, so a decent sized group. The first year we taught it, we had about 8, and so we had some challenges in terms of trying to figure out how that would all come together. In terms of how we selected the projects, I mentioned, so I'm the executive director of the SHI Center for Sustainability, relatively new to that role, now coming up on my 2nd year, but really realized quite quickly and was a little bit surprised that the university really did not have any kind of comprehensive vision or master plans around a lot of some of the typical sustainability topics, things like transportation or waste or landscape, or even looking at paths to carbon neutrality. So Jeff and I got together and I said there's a real need for this. In fact, actually something that if I was to do single-handedly would be really difficult. And so we looked at it as a pedagogical opportunity to kind of marry the need in terms of our sustainability planning with the student experience around the practicum project. We started by actually pre-selecting 5 topics that we wrote up a short description to share with the students on that first day of class. You'll see them there to the left. So alternative transportation. We have a 1/4-acre organic farm that really didn't have a strategic plan tied to it, and there was talk of some expansion opportunities. Sustainable landscape, I mentioned we have 750 acres, so a lot of landscape to manage. And we also recently purchased a piece of property on the edge of campus that we were looking at different possible uses of that property that hadn't yet been decided. And then last, we are a signature of the President's climate commitment and aspire to be carbon neutral by 2026. And so we've been looking very intently about how to chart what that path might look like. We presented all 5 of these to the students, and then they heard them out, and then they had to actually apply as if they were applying for a job to be on the project. So they had to submit a resume and a cover letter, and on that 2nd day of class, actually do a 5-minute kind of oral pitch as to why they should be a member of that team. We took those, and based on those applications, Jeff and I divided the class into 4 teams of 4. The one project that there was less interest was the path to carbon neutrality, but we had 4 project teams focused on the top 4 that are there. Over the course of the schedule for the fall course, we then systematically took students through the various components to actually seeing a vision document or master plan drafted. We did some of the usual things like have them review the literature, develop a logic model to kind of see how that project might go from start to finish, identify stakeholders and talk about how to engage with stakeholders, go through IRB in the case of those that were looking to do some survey work, try to have them think about it in terms of how that impacts our STARS assessment. So we are STARS Gold with aspirations of platinum. And so having them kind of think about how some of the recommendations they might put forth would tie into that. We wanted a data collection component with each of the projects, and then they do a lot of self and peer assessments, both in terms of the group dynamics and within the teams. And then the latter half of that fall course was really then helping them walk through the different systematic components of actually writing a draft report that would include an introduction, methods, results, discussion. And they went through a few iterations of that and a few drafts with feedback from Jeff and I back and forth. And it culminated really then on a complete draft by the end of the semester with a oral presentation kind of on the project report for the fall. Again, it was a 4-credit course, and so the bulk of the work was done during the fall. But we do also then have expectations that continue on into the spring. So the teams have been working together to kind of finalize their report. They've now gone through 3 additional drafts of the full report this spring. They are slated to do a public defense of their projects on Saturday to the department and faculty, staff, students, as well as family and community folks that will attend as well. They have a poster presentation for an all-day campus research day, which has been common at many institutions, next Tuesday. And they also are required to present a poster at a professional conference. And we went down to Atlanta and presented at the Next South Sustainability Conference about 3-4 weeks ago. So with that as kind of a backdrop, I want to turn it over to the students and let them share with you a short glimpse and kind of a brief overview of each of their projects. And then we'll come back around and talk about kind of next steps, lessons learned, and kind of reflect on the experience altogether. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the farm. So all yours. Eric and his team are here standing by.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric Sofronoff, and I'm here with Matthew and Morgan, and we are representing the farm squad. Today we'll be presenting a little bit on our project, which was developing a sustainable business plan and vision for a university campus farm. So we were working with the Furman farm, looking to enhance and kind of further develop the current business model of the farm and make it more economically self-sustaining, while including a reworking of the budget and some proposed expansion projects. And so for some context, here is a map of Furman University's campus, and that arrow there is pointing to the location of the farm. It is right next to the lake, right next to the AASHE Center for Sustainability, and right near the dining hall, which is very convenient for us because we have an agreement with the dining hall to sell all of the produce that we produce here to the dining hall providers, which is Bon Appetit. So this image here is a Google Earth image looking down at the farm. Currently, the farm has about 50 rows for planting. We have 4 on-site compost stations. We also have an in-vessel compost machine and an aquaponics system, which is currently being constructed.
Well, to start, the mission of the Furman Farm is to produce local and fresh food through the use of organic methods and be an educational site for class labs, farm fellows, and the surrounding community. We align the farm mission to our project mission by addressing Kate Raworth's Sustainability Doughnut. We analyzed the original donut and then addressed all the planetary boundaries and social foundations that could potentially be affected by any of the farming practices conducted on the farm. Of the 9 planetary boundaries, we chose land conversion, climate change, and chemical pollution. Of the 12 social foundations, we highlighted food, education, income, work, and networks. By looking at how these were to be impacted, we created 3 objectives to start our research, which includes maintain a balanced social foundation, develop a strong economic revenue stream, and maintain organic practices. This helped us stay focused and made sure sustainability was at the core of our project.
Next, we have methods. So our main stakeholder was Bruce Adams, the farm manager, and this is where we got most of our information from. Next, we have research. So we did research on other schools, and we used the AASHE report to find out what schools sell to their dining hall for local foods. Lastly, we had the budget analysis. So we went through last year's budget, and we analyzed it for recurring and non-recurring costs. Also, we looked at past receipts and figured out what do we sell to the Bon Appetit in our dining hall.
So a question for y'all is, what do you think the most profitable crop on the farm was?
Dida's going to open the poll here, and she said, well, she'll let us know when the poll is closed.
So we'll go for a couple more seconds to
Okay.
give a chance to vote, and we'll look at the results shortly.
That sounds great. We'll be ready for you.
All right. So let's see. There's still answers coming in, but I think we're gonna close the poll now, and let's share the results. So it looks like 38% thought the tomatoes were the highest, and followed by salad blend at 31 and basil at 31, and nobody chose broccoli.
Good to know. Poor broccoli.
Okay, well, tomatoes was the correct answer, so congrats to y'all who got that. This graph here kind of shows an overlay of two different interesting things that we looked at in our data analysis and from the collection of our receipts. We have the price per pound of all the types of produce that we sell, and then the total weight of that specific produce that we sold over the past year. So the blue bars represent the price per pound, and the orange dots is the total weight sold. So as you can see, we sold a lot of tomatoes last year, which was great for us. But an interesting thing that we found was some untapped revenue potential from our herbs. Rosemary, mint, and basil all sell for $6 a pound, but that was some of the least amount in total weight that we sold. And so this was a great argument for us to push for the expansion of a greenhouse to allow us more space for growing potential for those herbs to produce more revenue for the farm.
Next, we have the proposed additions. So we have box beds, an outdoor classroom and kitchen, and then a greenhouse. So for number one, this is where the box beds are going to be. Box beds can grow up to 4 times more than what could be grown in rows because there is no space between the rows. Next, we have the outdoor kitchen and classroom, and this is going to be where number 2 is on the map right there. Furman Farm had received an anonymous donation of $15,000 to build an outdoor classroom. So this could be a great site for sites where people can come and learn about organic farming, learn about the Furman Farm. Next, we have the Furman kitchen. So we have a sketch from Bon Appetit, which has a cob oven, a grill, a wood table, and stone floors. So what's great is that Bon Appetit is willing to work with us to have a kitchen on campus, and this could cost money. So hopefully they invest some money into our kitchen. Next, we have the greenhouse. So seed saving and expanding crop yield. So seed saving is where we have a seed and we save it for the next crop harvest. So last year we spent about $1,000 on seeds. So we have a greenhouse, we can save our seeds for the next harvest. Not only that, but with the greenhouse, we can have year-round growing for tomatoes and herbs. Compost and aquaponics. Last year, the Furman Farm produced 32.7 tons of compost, but we only used 6.2 tons of that on the Furman Farm for growing crops. So we have an excess of compost. So Bruce Adams, the farm manager, plans to sell compost at 20 cents a pound. So after this, we went and looked at other schools and what they sell their compost for. And so we looked at Ole Miss. Ole Miss sells their compost for 30 cents a pound. So as you can see, there's a 10-cent gap. So the reason is because Ole Miss has a compost sifter. So they invest in a sifter which can sort through the compost and pick out the contaminants such as silverware. And right now, the Furman dining hall, we have a problem with contamination of silverware. And so this is our forks, our knives, and our spoons. So this ends up in our compost, and we cannot sell contaminated compost to people. Then we have aquaponics. So this is a combination of aquaculture and hydroponics. And to put it simply, this is where we have a system that can grow fish, prawns, and can also grow plants. So right now, the plan is to have leafy greens such as spinach, kale, and salad blends, while also having prawns. And with this, we can increase the yield of the farm by 50%.
A huge part of our research was dedicated to analyzing the past and current budget of the Furman Farm. And our main goal, as well as the university's goal, is to have the farm become more economically sustainable. This is an important aspect in Raworth's Doughnut Model, income and wealth, where sufficient income is a viable part of humanity to reach a safe and just place. The proposed additions we have just talked about have helped us do this, as they would bring in more revenue streams. This is just a visual representation of how the budget could look. To start, the proposed greenhouse would cost us about $11,000, but would help us seed save for the rest of the farm, including the additions, and increase our yield substantially year-round. The box beds would cost around $2,500, but would also increase our yields on unused land surrounding the farm. Our last recommendation was to purchase a compost sifter, costing approximately $1,500, which may seem steep, but has the potential to make up this investment in less than 3 months after implementation because of the other components we already have in place. With these additions, we would also need more manpower on the farm, which was also taken into consideration. In a simpler visual, this is how the first year budget will look if our recommendations were to be included. We would be at an estimated deficit of over $4,000, but would have the potential to make a profit for future years within the operations of the farm. Not only do these additions have this economic potential, Furman has the opportunity to become a leader among other universities that have campus farms and can even be used as a model framework for other schools looking to implement farms on their campuses. The farm would require and motivate more campus and community involvement, thus resulting in an educational enhancement of small-scale sustainable food systems. Great.
Thank you so much.
All right. So my name is Will Patterson. I'm a team member of what we call the Grace Property. Our project is titled Envisioning Community in Place, a Sustainable Vision for Furman's Grace Property. My other group members are here, but I'll be presenting the bulk of the project today. So to give you an introduction really quickly, the Grace Property itself is 32 acres that Furman purchased several years back. It was formerly a fertilizer plant, and as a result of such, actually 44% of the property is concrete. It's only a 5-minute bike ride from Furman down what we know as the Swamp Rabbit Trail. If you can see on the map there, it's kind of hard to tell because that line is pretty small, but the outline in red is the Grace Property itself, and you can see there's a trail that runs through the center where there's a lot of concrete, and that is the Swamp Rabbit Trail. It's a trail that connects Travelers Rest and Greenville communities, just basically a biking and recreation area. So our goal was to create a vision and mission plan for our team and our project, and we created what we wanted to be a socially innovative space to engage community members that was centered around sustainability and education. Our mission statement is to utilize the Grace Property to support a space for social innovation and sustainable outcomes. Essentially, this entire project was creating a vision for the property. So our plan, which we took last semester and a lot of this semester to come up with, was to create an environmentally minded and equitable based community that will create sustainable outcomes for present and future generations. To do this, though, we didn't just want to create a vision that wasn't centered around anything. So we came up with 4 what we call elements of interest. As you can see there on the screen, they are the makerspace, the farm-to-table restaurant, housing, and the retail center. So a lot of this presentation today is going to be me walking you through how we came up with those 4 ideas and determined that they would make the best place for the Grace Property. Like we've already seen prior to this presentation, what our major is centered around Kate Raworth's Doughnut Model. So we relied heavily on this to come up with our vision, incorporating food, health, education, and then while also trying to remain below that ecological ceiling. So what will make the Grace Property a safe and just place is our goal was to create something that was viable, desirable, and feasible. We needed a framework to assess our vision in those 4 aspects. So after working with several stakeholders and professors on campus, we found that this framework actually creates the space for innovation, which is exactly what we're looking for on the Grace Property. We needed a framework that aligned with our vision and mission, but would also assess the elements of our project. We believe the framework that we've come up with to evaluate these is the best that we can do at this point in time, and that innovative space will really help set Furman apart, but also make the Grace Property something that would be unique to Greenville and the Furman campus. Our methods for this project involved stakeholder meetings. We actually also partnered with a graduate program from Ball State University. They were a graduate studies program in architectural landscape and design. So they were crucial for our vision. We really enjoyed working with them. It was a great relationship to build with another university and to really see hands-on experience at the graduate studies level as well. We actually involved a visual survey first semester. That was a simple visual survey with students and community members to basically gain feedback for some ideas and what the campus and the community would like to see on a piece of property. And then this semester, we actually released a large online survey to gain feedback about our vision that we've created to see if we could create community buy-in. So this is the first image that we received from Ball State University. Their class was divided up into 3 project groups as well. So it was interesting because we got 3 different versions that they gave us. Each of their groups provided a draft, and each one is centered around something a little different. So this is their first one. It's centered around the makerspace aspect. As you can see, they've labeled it design school, but it would be the makerspace in this case in the center with the red star. The next is the second design. It's environmentally focused. You can see there's a lot more incorporation of green space and highlights sort of the Swamp Rabbit Trail and the interconnectedness between the different parts of campus or this piece of property. And then lastly, they provided us with a retail-focused design. As you can see right there, the center along the Swamp Rabbit Trail is actually the road that runs through that property. The retail plaza would be right there in the middle. The nice thing about each of those aspects is that each one of those plans still incorporated all 4 aspects that we felt was important to the Grace property. But we wanted to ask which of the following designs would be the most desirable. And this was actually a similar question that we asked on our online survey, and we wanted to see what you guys had to say.
So we'll give it maybe 2 more seconds or so.
Sounds good.
All the votes in, and we'll see what our audience thinks. All right, so I'm gonna close this poll, and the results are environmental 67%, makerspace 33, and 0% retail focused.
Can you repeat the environmental for me?
I think she said 67.
67. Okay, well, interesting.
Yeah.
Our survey results actually found that most people felt the makerspace would be the centerpiece for this project. So I actually enjoyed hearing your guys' responses. Given that this is an AASHE conference, I'm not surprised. But we felt that the makerspace would actually be the most important piece for this property. And based on a lot of our online surveys, that's actually the response we've gotten as well from both community members in Greenville and Travelers Rest, as well as the campus community involving students, professors, which we think the makerspace really creates the university buy-in that a project like this would entail. But then when we take a look at the makerspace and we try to engage with our framework that we created between viability, desirability, and feasibility, as you guys can see, the makerspace is an increasing trend among university campuses across the country. And through our secondary research, we had extensive documents and actually interaction with other professors around the country that showed that many universities are now engaging in makerspaces on their campuses. And we feel that for Furman to continue being a top-of-the-line liberal arts university, this would be something that would help set them apart. Again, that also relays into the desirability, but we demonstrated that as well through stakeholder engagement. The Ball State design teams were crucial with that. And then creating the online and visual surveys this semester really helped to generate the desirability and feedback from community members. And then the feasibility of this project was helping align the makerspace with Furman's mission. Our team feels that if Furman would ever engage with the makerspace, it would have to align with their goals and their mission statement, or else they would not be interested in the project. Again, to support the makerspace and the Grace property, we felt there was something that needed to generate revenue. This is where we engaged in a farm-to-table restaurant. After meeting with actually several chefs from Bon Appetit, our dining services provider on campus, and chefs from the Greenville community, we found that actually local farm-to-table restaurants do generate quite a bit of revenue. This semester, we engaged in also an extensive market analysis to examine the Greenville community. We found that the Greenville community actually has a very successful farm-to-table restaurant community already, and helping to show the viability that something like this could happen actually on a college campus in the area. The desirability, again, a lot of our visual surveys and our online surveys told us that students and community members would be interested in something like this around Furman. And then the feasibility, we have 32 acres to work with here, and something like this requires very little land. And at that point, it would be down to the financial point of making it happen. So, next, we have our housing. We envision sort of a tiny housing and mixed use. A lot of our survey did provide that feedback. And we're looking for housing that fosters an intentional, sustainable community with a low environmental impact. Through a lot of our secondary research, we've actually found that housing is the most fast developing thing on campus or on college campuses when incorporated with a makerspace community. You really get a holistic developed community that engages beyond just a classroom experience or that makerspace experience. And we were hoping to incorporate those intentional communities in a more successful and from the framework's perspective, viable way. And then post-baccalaureate students at Furman, actually we interviewed several of them, and we found that they were actually unhappy with their housing experience nearby and felt that this would be something that they would be very interested in and possibly engaging in the community. Lastly, tiny houses are actually very cheap to create. We found that through our research as well. So this would be something Furman would not have to put a lot of revenue into or a lot of financial assets into to hopefully have a return. And lastly, we have a retail center. Again, meeting with some members of Furman's campus, we knew that we would have to generate revenue on this piece of property, and we felt retail was the quickest way to do so. And entrepreneurship is key for Furman and having those student engaged experiences. We felt that there was a unique opportunity to sort of relay those two communities together and hopefully increase the overall profitability of this property as well to engage Furman and hopefully generate some interest from them. So, and thank you guys very much for your time today. And without further ado, I will introduce the Sustainable Transportation team.
Hi, everyone. We will be looking at the Sustainable Alternative Transportation Plan for Furman University. I'm Marissa, and I have Lauren, Duncan, and Britt here with me. So Furman resides between two major highways in Greenville, South Carolina. It is 15 minutes away from downtown Greenville and 5 minutes away from Travelers Rest. On average, about 2,600 vehicles come to campus on a daily basis. Furman's current transit options include a bike sharing program, a semester bike rental program, on-campus shuttles, and Greenville's public transit service, the Green Link. Some of the current problems Furman is facing is that we are a very car-centric campus due to our campus culture. The car is seen as the most convenient option to students on campus, which contributes to a more sedentary lifestyle. There is also a lack of interconnectedness between current campus members and groups, which creates lack of awareness and engagement. There is also a lack of available and reliable alternative transportation options for off-campus commuting. As a reference point, this is a map of Furman University's campus, which shows housing and academic buildings.
Similar to the other groups, we use Kate Raworth's Sustainability Doughnut Model. The Doughnut Model essentially has planetary boundaries and social foundations, which, when combined, create a safe and just space for humanity. We chose, of these planetary boundaries and social foundations, we chose 3 specific features, which include climate change, health, and education. We felt that these were the most applicable to our transportation project. From looking at the framework, we created 3 overarching goals, which are well-being, an educational hub, and reducing carbon emissions. We had a variety of different sources and methods in terms of research. Firstly, we talked to over 20 stakeholders. This was through either face-to-face interactions, emails, or even GIS projects. Secondly, we looked at and used the sustainability survey, which was a survey run through the SHI Center of Sustainability at Furman University. The survey was distributed to faculty, staff, and students. Thirdly, we created our own survey, the practicum survey, which got 474 responses. This was strictly for students. This was a way to see how aware people are of the transportation options on campus and to get a better understanding of the behaviors the student body has. We looked at the AASHE reports and compared our school to other schools based on how they ranked in terms of transportation. And lastly, we looked at over 17 other colleges and universities' literature reviews.
So we would like to ask the question, what percent of students on campus own bikes versus cars? 50% of students own bikes, 80% of cars, 80% of bikes, 50 cars, 50% of bikes, 50 cars, 80% of bikes, or 20% of cars.
We're going to give it a couple more seconds and let's see what our audience thinks. All right. So 64% think that the first answer is correct, 50% bikes and 80% cars, followed by 80% for the second answer, and then at 9% the last two answers.
Okay, the first answer is correct, the 50% of bikes and 80% of cars. So from our survey, we found that 80% of students on campus own a vehicle, whereas only 58% of students have a bicycle on campus, which is further contributing to Furman's car-centric campus, as it shows that students rely more on cars than bicycles as a form of transportation. From our survey, we also found that 43% of students have shown interest in riding the campus shuttle, which is funded by the Student Government Association, if it were run on a 15-minute interval, which shows the desire of an improved shuttle schedule by students, which would hopefully increase shuttle ridership. We also found from our survey that 21% of students only 21% of students are aware of the GreenLink bus system, which is Greenville's public transit system that comes onto Furman's campus, which further contributes to the 90% of students that don't ever use the GreenLink bus system because they are not aware of it. From our survey, we also found that 54% of bicycle riders on campus own a bike, whereas 43% of riders use Spin. And Spin is a third-party national company that was introduced to Furman University on October 11th, and they brought 85 bicycles, and it is a dockless bike share program where students pay 50 cents per 30-minute ride. And they brought this to campus as a free 6-month trial for Furman, and students access the bike using the app. And the hotspot map of desired covered bike parking shows where students on campus want desired covered bike racks to protect their bikes, for example, in rain or snow. And we found that students mostly want a covered bike rack at the dining hall, the library, or the freshman housing dorms. because most freshmen own a bike on campus.
From these results, we have been in discussion with Furman Facilities Services Department about implementation of various small projects. 17 covered bike racks have been approved by facilities and the housing department to be installed in the freshman housing block. Our group is currently in contact with the Student Government Association about securing this funding. Facilities has also installed a new LED light at the intersection we identified as most hazardous for pedestrians and bicycles. Facilities has repainted the bike lane along the main road of campus as well. Additional bike racks will be added to the student center, and sports facilities after funding is secured. And lastly, we have also talked with the health science department about creating a short transit presentation for wellness classes to educate students. Some of our overarching recommendations include establishing a transportation board. This board would create awareness and implementation of the plan and transparency as well. The Student Government Association, Furman Police, Facilities, SHI Center for Sustainability, SHI Center for Sustainability Alternative Transportation Fellows, students, faculty, and staff would make up this board. Also, we found that 75% of students would be inclined to use an overall Furman app if there was one. This campus app could be all-encompassing and would have all transit options, as well as dining hall hours, post office hours, and relevant campus news. Lastly, we would like to establish a parking fund and have been in contact with the Furman Police about adding an additional cost to our current vehicle registration yearly fee. This extra money could be directed to a sustainability fund, which would be used for various alternative transit projects throughout campus. With these recommendations, we hope to see changes in Furman University's transportation situation. Thank you. And now we will move on to our last group.
Hi there, my name is Susie Wold and I am a member of the final practicum project with India Butler, Ann Legg Margiata, and Trevor Woods. For our project, we developed a sustainable landscape plan for Furman University. Pictured here is the ethnobotany garden that you can find outside of the Plyler Science Building. In our project, we identified 5 main focus areas that are integral to sustainability in the Furman landscape. In this presentation, we will give a brief outline of each focus area and our recommendations for Furman moving forward. The first focus area we'll look at is campus turf and lawn management. In the creation of a sustainable landscape plan for Furman, turf must play a major role because it is not only a large portion of the Furman landscape makeup, but it also plays a vital role in the overall health of the landscape. Furman is known for its large manicured lawns, as shown in this photo of the area outside of the James B. Duke Library. Furman has already taken steps to lower the resource needs of campus turf by installing Bermuda 419 and Fescue, which are low maintenance and drought resistant turf varieties. Even so, turf still accounts for the bulk of irrigation needs on campus. The wide expanses of turf on campus also bring up monoculture concerns. Historically, Furman has used 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year on its turf. But as of September 2017, Furman implemented the plant probiotic Wholeganics, which is projected to decrease the use of nitrogen by 50% in the coming years. Wholeganics contains more than 800 species of beneficial soil microbes that help to reduce the need for synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. Moving forward, we recommend that Furman monitors the effects of Wholeganics on fertilizer, pesticides, and herbicide use to make sure that it follows the projected models. In order to increase biodiversity on campus, turf areas should be decreased in non-integral areas, as you can see in these photos on the slide. These areas can be replanted with diverse native species, as shown already in the yard of the Plyler Science Building on our opening slide.
As Susie just mentioned, Furman has 750 acres of campus to irrigate and maintain. We have heard many complaints from students that Furman irrigates while it's raining. So we decided to compare the Greenville precipitation data from the United States Geological Society to the Swan Lake irrigation data to determine if Furman's irrigation is dependent upon the weather. We found that the Swan Lake irrigation is not dependent on yearly precipitation, as shown in the graph on the screen. Due to the results, we recommend that Furman install a weather station to shut off irrigation when it is precipitating outside. Today, Furman is using 50% potable water, which comes from the city, and 50% lake water to irrigate. By the end of the year, we want to be using 30% potable water and 70% lake water. We believe this is feasible because of conversations we have had with multiple facility stakeholders. Our next focus area is stormwater management. As you can see in the picture on the right, the red outlines all impervious surfaces on Furman's campus. Currently, 24% of Furman is covered by roads, buildings, and parking. We expect this percentage to increase as Furman expands and develops. The issue with stormwater runoff on campus is that water that flows into the Furman Lake, which increases phosphorus levels. This leads to algae blooms that prove to be extremely detrimental to aquatic life. Our recommendations are that Furman increase permeable surfaces. In the picture on the right, you can see a newly renovated parking lot. Furman placed medians filled with turf, mulch, and trees to mitigate stormwater. We encourage the continuation of projects such as this. We also recommend that Furman create more rain gardens and retention ponds.
All right, our next topic is lake management. Swan Lake lies in the center of Furman's campus and plays a large role in the campus landscape. To find out more about the current condition of the lake, we reviewed data from water samples, which began being collected in 2001, and which continue to be collected today. We reviewed these to determine the condition of the lake and found that there is fluctuations in the water chemistry measurements due to different time and locations of each collection. But it's clear from the data we saw that there is a really high E. coli level in the lake. We also found that the streams that feed into the lake are high in nitrates, but the retention ponds that outline the periphery of the lake do a great job of filtering out the water. These factors above make the lake not currently fit for human interaction and use. Can actually pose significant health problems. Given the information we collected, our recommendations for lake management include collecting more water samples from Swan Lake on a regular basis and from consistent locations, so we can learn more about the lake and have current information as the lake chemistry changes. We should also limit human contact with the water in Swan Lake just for health reasons. And finally, more progress should be made following the Lake Restoration Plan, which began in 2002 and which we've been making slow progress on over the past decade or so. We should finally allow Swan Lake to gradually fill in with sediment, which is currently occurring, and become a constructed wetland. This would require much less maintenance in the long run for the lake and allow for an increase in campus biodiversity.
Our final focus area is communal spaces. Communal spaces are a key part to our sustainable landscape plan. They are essential to the physical environment of a college campus as they provide context for learning and foster social interaction. This leads to student involvement and builds a community across campus. Furman currently lacks communal spaces by residence halls, which is essential as almost all students live on campus. We targeted the 4 housing areas in our intervention. In order to get student input, we created an IRB certified Instagram survey. The students were instructed to look at the Instagram page and like the pictures of what they would like to see replicated at Furman. We divided this survey into 3 categories: communal spaces, integrated landscape, and outdoor classrooms, as seen on the screen. The survey ran for 2 weeks and we got 52 responses. Our recommendations show a combination of interest from the survey, what has worked at other college campuses, and what would be suitable for Furman. We recommend implementing connectables outside of freshman dorms. These are solar-powered work tables that have been successful at other universities, including the University of Virginia, the University of Georgia, and the University of Alabama. We believe these tables would bring students outside and foster a studious and communal environment. The second recommendation is green roofs to be planted on top of the academic buildings at Furman. Currently, the university has gravel roofs. We believe this could improve the biodiversity and stormwater management of the university and not inhibit the aesthetic beauty Furman is known for. Our final recommendation is an outdoor classroom near the academic buildings. Currently, Furman does not have any learning spaces outside that is suitable for a classroom. We recommend the university implements one similar to the picture on the screen as it fosters discussion-based learning.
So now we'd like to get some feedback from y'all. Do any of y'all's campuses have features such as outdoor classrooms, green roofs, solar-powered charging stations, or active outdoor spaces such as trampolines, swings, or other things?
All right, so let's see what our audience thinks. We have, okay, so 50% have a solar power charging station, and the other three answers are all at 40%. So outdoor classroom, green roof, and active outdoor space are all at 40%. So pretty close, all of them.
So we have work to do is what you're telling us, Dinah.
Absolutely. All right, and finally, a large portion of our data was collected from conversations with these stakeholders. We just wanted to take this time to recognize and thank them for their cooperation and help with our project.
All right, lastly, at the end of the semester, like most college campuses, we got student feedback on the course and found some interesting items. So given this was only the second time that we offered the practicum, and I mentioned the idea of having capstone signature work, students certainly recognize the strength of the capstone and giving them some applied collaborative work. It also allowed students some creativity in terms of some of the methods they utilized. And we also had some professional development activities that we didn't cover in this session. However, you see the students did recognize a lot of weaknesses in the project practicum. So a lot of them are related to the idea of having unscripted learning spaces. So having a lack of structure, as you can see, we had 4 different projects. They each kind of operated on their own separate timeline with different stakeholders. And so trying to make sure that we had a structure that fit all the projects was a challenge. We also had differences in terms of expectations in terms of the projects because we didn't have a concrete thing to say we wanted to accomplish X by a certain time. That led to some uncertainty in terms of the students. We also mentioned the fact that this was an option whether students could pursue a thesis or the practicum. And so there was some misunderstanding or different expectations for a thesis as was a practicum, and yet some of what we did in terms of looking at the writing and the expectations on methods and results and the rubrics we used were similar to what the thesis group was going through. Also, given the fact that these are unscripted projects, you can tell from the presentations that a couple of the student projects ran into the spring. So that was also kind of didn't fit the student expectations to take a class in the fall and be done with it. As you can see, we had lots of drafts. There was some data collection that was going into the spring, and yet students only get the same 4 credits that they would have taken for a class that ended into the fall. And lastly, we were trying to figure out ways students to make presentations at a conference. And it took us a while to figure out where that would happen. So the students did give a presentation at the Next South conference in Atlanta, where they made poster presentations, and then we're doing a presentation here today with AASHE. However, all of that took a while to finalize, and that led to student uncertainty since that was part of the requirement of the course.
And so I'll end by just kind of saying what next. So as I mentioned, I wear 2 hats. So I'm a faculty member in Earth and Environmental Science, but also direct the AASHE Center for Sustainability. My interest in this actually really stemmed from the fact that as in my role at the AASHE Center, had really realized that we didn't have any of these kind of comprehensive, integrated, holistic master plans around a lot of these topics. For me to take this on as an individual or even have my small staff take these on would have been a fairly daunting task. But by marrying this notion of this need with this course and having the students kind of lead, I'm really proud of the outcomes that have come out. These documents were not just an academic exercise, but now really are going to act as kind of foundational documents moving forward, really actually trying to see if we can implement a lot of the recommendations that the students have come up with. So from my end, this has been a great experience in terms of really now giving me that document that I can use as a document to shop to our administration, to our operations and facility staff, to other faculty, to future student groups that come forward. And so that's been a huge leap forward, I think, really in terms of allowing us to really bring a lot of these pieces that had always kind of been there, but have been kind of operating in isolation or autonomously into one comprehensive vision. You probably have seen even that some of these recommendations are already being implemented, so that was really exciting. I hadn't really even seen that as coming forward. In higher ed, sometimes it can take a while to kind of jump through all the hoops to kind of move progress forward, but in the case of many of these plans, that interaction and dialogue with students, with facility staff, administrators, others have really, I think, kind of moved the needle. And so whether it's new covered biking or changing in our landscaping plan, or even a discussion of adding a design thinking or maker space on campus or on the property we talked about, as well as addition to the farm. These are now active discussions that are being had at a much higher level that, again, wouldn't have been happening or wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the class and all the work that the students have done. So with that, I will open the floor, Dinah, and turn it back to you in terms of if there are any questions for folks. We want to make sure we left some time here at the end in case people wanted to follow up, either asking Jeffrey and I about the pedagogical components, or if there's specific questions about any of the projects. The students are all here and I can direct questions to them.
Thank you so much, Jeff, Wes, and all the students for these very interesting presentations. Yes, we will now turn to our audience for questions, and we have received a couple. Okay. But before we start, I want to remind everyone to not be shy and ask questions for Wes or Jeff or the students. And to do that, you type them via the questions pane on the GoToWebinar control panel. So there was a question for the first group, the farm group. Okay. You mentioned you have 2.7 tons of composting. Wow, that's a lot of compost. Is it all coming as waste from dining services?
Yes, it's all coming as waste from the dining services, all of it. Mm-hmm.
One of the nice things that we've been allowed to do is we do not only our pre-consumer waste, but we're actually taking all our post-consumer waste from our dining hall facility. So we're 100% compostable dining hall facility. So we can take all of the food waste, literally all of the food waste, and compost it on site.
Okay, so they're making lots of extra food maybe with all that.
Hungry waste. Students, but maybe not hungry enough. Maybe their eyes are bigger than their stomachs, apparently.
Yes.
It adds all up. Right. I think I was going to say, although that is a huge amount, again, with 2,700 students on an all residential campus, all those students are eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all of them actually on campus. So it does add up, even if it's a small amount per person.
Thank you. Can you, there are a couple of questions that you may have addressed a little bit already, Wes, but maybe go a little bit more in detail on how the SHI Center plans to implement the recommendations made during each practicum this year and in future years. Also about how you got administration buy-in for like other people's buy-in to get these recommendations from the students implemented.
Yeah, great question. So on the front end, in terms of the SHI Center, so a little bit more about the SHI Center. So the SHI Center is now 10 years old. It's an academic center on campus, so it's a physical space. It is a former Southern Living Showcase home, so it's actually a quite nice home. It's a green design home on the edge of campus. So I reside there and have a staff of 5 that work with me around all things sustainability on campus. So we are tasked really with more on the academic side, infusing sustainability across the curriculum. So we do a lot around faculty development, as well as creating high impact student experiences around like a fellowship program and grants program and others. Your question regarding these plans is a good one, in a sense that I think like many institutions, the problem resides as to kind of where do those plans, if one, who's going to write them, and two, if they get written, who's going to lead the charge to make sure that they get implemented. I see my role, and actually the SHI Center's role, again, if we, quote unquote, I wouldn't say, I don't think I have ownership over these, but in my role or capacity at the SHI Center, we can help be the advocates to help convene the various stakeholders necessary. And these documents provide actually like substantive framing documents that allow me to actually have us all on the same page. So moving forward, I think is, again, I can use the transportation plan as a group. There is a group called the Traffic Board that exists already. And so although they have focused mostly on traffic violations and stuff, I have made a pitch to them to say, hey, we have this framing document. We already have a committee on staff. Why don't we actually fold this idea of a sustainable transportation plan into that group so that as we convene, we have kind of internal advocates sounding board around. As you all know, with these, it really becomes about relationships and building stakeholder buy-in. Furman has been really lucky, I have to say. I know like a lot of other institutions where it's been hard to get folks in facilities and operations interested in sustainability, or maybe administrators to rally around sustainability. Having a center that acts as that hub that can pull all those folks together, as well as the fact that it's kind of in our brand and our mission. We've been committed to sustainability for a good few decades. I have not had to fight those battles as hard as I know many of my colleagues have had to at other institutions. We have a very supportive administration, particularly if we can make the economics work on that. And so, you know, having the economic assessment piece in terms of making changes, if we can show that in the long run it's economically beneficial, has made, I think, a lot of these recommendations become very viable all of a sudden. Other question, I guess, yeah, I mean, so moving forward, it'll be interesting to see. I plan to convene kind of similar small subcommittees around each of these different plans that would help with the implementation. I don't expect all the recommendations to be accepted instantaneously, but at least it now lays out a set of recommendations that I can work to prioritize based on ones that I think are most viable first and maybe have the most benefit first, and then we'll work our way down there. But again, thanks to the students really and all their hard work, I actually now have a tangible, you know, 50, 60 page document that clearly lays out both the arguments for as well as kind of a strategy moving forward.
Thank you. There's two questions related to resources. So what resources are available to develop the recommendations and continue to advance the feasible projects? And also, will you be willing to share any of the course content or resources after the webinar? I guess they're different resources, but
yeah. No, so from the resource standpoint, again, I mean, I don't have a dedicated budget necessarily towards any of these plans. But again, if I can get it into the strategic thinking of the institution and we can plan forward, again, I have a staff member who works as a liaison with our campus operations group. So instances around, say, transportation or landscape, again, we'll kind of bite off small bits at a time, but there are ways to kind of get it into the operating budget of each of those entities. The SHI Center has a modest budget, but again, we can help use that to leverage some of these, as well as, you know, there is grant money out there, there's donor money out there. It gives me, again, something tangible to go chase certain funds if I know what resources are necessarily available. Most of these recommendations that have been put forth, although the intentional community, obviously there's a lot of capital investment for the actual construction, but a lot of the issues around the farm, the landscape and transportation are not typically high cost items, which I think makes them more feasible and probably even more appealing to kind of some smaller scale donors kind of around that. In terms of the pedagogy, certainly no. Anyone's more than welcome to reach out to Jeffrey or myself. I'm all of the favor of sharing with regards to sustainability. Yeah, we can definitely talk on the phone or email if those want to reach out to us and talk a little bit about more of the course dynamics and structure. Yes, I mean, so I'm totally open to that if folks have more interest in wanting to know more about the nuts and bolts of how we pulled it off.
Thank you. You also talked a little bit about the timeline for the practicum work, that it went into the spring semester. So there was a question about, did the timeline actually work out the way you expected it to?
I think overall, I mean, I think there's always, I think, a lot of expectation and ambition when you come through, and you hope that you'll be able to kind of like stick to the timeline. For those that have done community-based or even campus-based work, particularly when you're dependent on external stakeholders, there is always sometimes those hiccups that are unexpected where you're waiting for a response for someone or trying to set up a meeting. Jeffrey has a ton of work in that realm, and so I think, we were able to kind of build in some cushion and recognize that that's kind of part of the process. I realize at times that was probably frustrating for students where they're like, I'm waiting on X, Y, and Z, or I need my IRB approval before I can do this or that. So I think we knew it was going to kind of bleed out over into the spring. The hope was that at least by the end of the fall, they would have a pretty sizable and well-crafted draft. Some groups were further along than others, and so I think, in terms of the work that had to be done in the spring, it varied. I know in some cases, a couple of the groups were pretty close to finishing up, and it was more fine-tuning, and in the other case, some groups were still waiting on some data that bleeded out into the spring. It is hard. We've even talked about the idea of making the course a full year-long course, so it would add another credit-bearing component to the spring, but that is also challenging given student schedules as well as GERs and major requirements, etc. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that as well in terms of, but I think overall it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, and that's kind of the structure of the department at this point. So I mentioned the thesis and the practicum. So the thesis, the students actually do their thesis projects during the summer. So they're actually working in the summer on the research. Then they come in the fall and they do their writing, and then they continue to do their writing and revisions in the spring. So actually the thesis has, you could call it a 3-semester commitment, where the practicum is more condensed. So you're doing your research, your writing, and then you have the spring. So they're both extended time courses that's just spread out over a different amount of time. And like Wes said, trying to have a conversations for how we can perhaps spread the credit, and then also make it clear to students that that's what the expectation was. And as a new faculty member, I wasn't sure what was conveyed to students beforehand, but as I go to teach this practicum in the fall, I'm already reaching out to our students in terms of making it more transparent and making those expectations clearer about how to make that transition happen.
Thank you. Can you speak to the advanced work necessary to open lines of communication between students and staff? Also, how did you manage disparate data streams and departmental territoriality of said data? So I guess this question is regarding the external, so outside stakeholders from your class.
Yeah, and I think for each of the projects, they had a range. So for some of the projects, there was very few external stakeholders, where there were other projects that had a lot of external stakeholders. And so some of them, for each of the groups, we kind of, to start with, we seeded them with stakeholders. We had already had those conversations with them. So clearly, when you're talking about the director of landscape or facilities, those are already ongoing relationships that Wes had as director of the Sustainability Center, also with previous sustainability science projects. So some of these we had relationships with already. So on the first week that we had stakeholder engagement, the students didn't have to do anything. We just invited the stakeholders there and they had their meetings. After that, it became as a case-by-case basis. So some of them had to engage with 35 people, where some groups only did 17, which again made it kind of hard to standardize across groups because it was on an as-needed basis. So there was some seeding of it, and then it was also up to the students to determine as they gained more information, who else do you need to talk to? Who else do you need to talk to? So in the case of Ball State, we made conversations with a faculty member there as the semester was going on. So we didn't ask the students to, hey, find a landscape architecture program to develop your plans. We had already done that. But it was the students who sat down in this room actually and had calls like this to actually work that out.
And I'd say in terms of the territorial end, Furman doesn't have as much turf war as I know other institutions have. So I mean, again, sustainability has been more of a unifier than I think a divider. So again, as long as I found actually we have not run into problems with data sharing or necessarily ownership. I'm careful not to make sure that the SHI Center takes credit for things that are not necessarily mine. And so we are very celebratory in terms of all the stakeholders that contribute. You know, we are quick to recognize all of them whenever we do something like this. So yeah, that has been, I mean, you know, it's all about relationships, as you all well know. And again, making sure that you are inclusive instead of exclusive, and then be sure to give credit where credit's due. I found that to actually work pretty well in terms of getting the data that we needed and having people kind of collaborate. The other thing I'd mention is the SHI Center has been in existence for 10 years, so this is not necessarily a new endeavor. As Jeff said, these are relationships that have been long-standing. There's not a high turnover at Furman in terms of faculty and staff, and so you know, as we develop projects, we're going back to the same people, and we've had success with those, so they've seen that it can work and that this isn't just necessarily an academic endeavor, that our intent is really genuine in terms of kind of moving the needle and moving us in a more sustainable direction.
Thank you, Wes. We have time only for one last question, which is, what are your plans for the fall? So are you going to have this class again, and how are you going to do anything different?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, and Wes talked about the design of the practicum, it was always meant to be applied sustainability projects with working with stakeholders. So the first time we offered it, it was working with off-campus in Greenville. This time it's on campus, and in the fall it will go back to being off-campus. In the fall, we're partnering with Roper Mountain Science Center. They're developing a new $9 million facility. They do a lot of the science education in the K through 8 in the Greenville area. And they want to switch to, or not switch to, but add in sustainability science to their traditional science programs. So they'll put in this environmental science center, but they don't do sustainability. So we're asking the practicum cohort to work with them to develop curriculum, exhibits, and programming on this new facility to bring in sustainability science. So we would tie them into the K through 8 standards, and there are no sustainability standards. So we're going to be working with trying to figure out how to bring in natural science standards and social science standards so that the activities that they engage in fit sustainability science. We're also engaging with our community partners to put that sustainability science out into the community. So we have after-school programs and community gardens who will also benefit from having this sustainability science curriculum to build our networks and outreach from the Roper Mountain to the community and from the community to Roper Mountain. So that class in the fall will focus exclusively on the Roper Mountain science program.
Thank you very much. Before we conclude today's webinar, I want to let everyone know about our next webinar, Training in Environmental Policy Advocacy During Challenging Times, will take place next Wednesday, April 11, starting at 3 p.m. This webinar is designed to give you tools to empower students to advocate for environmental policy and improvements statewide or nationally. You can learn more about this webinar and our other professional development offerings on our website, and I hope you'll join us again. Thank you so much, Wes, Jeffrey, and all the students for sharing your projects with us and your expertise, and thank you everyone for attending. If there's additional questions remaining, please email them to education@aashe.org, or to myself at taita.sergi@aashe.org. And the recording and presentation materials will be available in the AASHE Hub tomorrow, and you'll receive a notification once they're uploaded. Thank you and have a good day.
Thanks, Taita.
Thank you.